sit back with us, enjoy these discussions as we define and talk about the 6 signature traits of inclusive leadership.
What does collaboration mean to you?
So I'm a 1 Charlie 3 by trade, command and control. And with our career field, collaboration does not work without all hands on deck. Myself as a leader and an additional duty first sergeant, I do not believe in the antiquated pyramid leadership scheme where the leader is at the top and everybody else is below. For me, leadership is more of a circle where everybody in that circle has a valued interest in the goal of the conversation, whether it's a new idea or a decision point, as well as having that valued interest in being a part of that solution. And so leading that way allows members to all collaborate and give their ideas freely and then come to that common ground. It empowers them to be a leader within that group. It empowers them to team together and find those solutions that are out. I task it down to one of my airmen and I stand behind them. Whatever they need, resources, and just basically be that backbone for them and then empower them to make those decisions.
How do you make sure everyone is heard and included?
If needed, I will step in. I think that we have built a very open and honest group of individuals that feel empowered and able to talk about the things that they need to. But if at any point we feel that the conversation is going in a direct way that is not inclusive to all members, then I shut it down. That's pretty easy to do in an environment where you've already empowered inclusivity. And then also to make sure that every single person feels that they are equally a part of that team.
Hi, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Yourself?
I'm excited for this. So, when you think of courage, who's the first person that comes to you?
So the first person that comes to mind is my mom. So a lot of folks may or may not know, but I'm a biracial kid. So my mom's Korean, my dad's Black, and I think that when you have anything like that, I mean, you're in love, right? But then you have to really think about some of the repercussions that come after that. And I think that she took a risk and challenge in knowing that she was relying on faith, relying on her love, and coming to the United States, not having a high school diploma, getting her GED. Growing her own business out of nothing, and she still has it, is thriving to this day. So when I think of courage, I think of my mom because of all the challenges she's had to meet within her community, in the Korean community, and in my dad's community as well, and not being accepted. Yeah.
What are your expectations of how a leader should exemplify this trait?
That's a good question. I think that a part of this is, of course, policy changes, right? We have to make sure policy reflects what we're trying to get after. But most importantly, I think that, as people in an institution such as the Air Force, we have to really accept this policy change. We have to internally agree that we're going to take a step forward and make a conscious effort to make change. And I think that within some of this, the very foundations of, humility and also bravery comes to mind when you think about courage. And, it's leaving yourself raw, it's open, it's really accepting blame when you're at fault. And I think that's the foundation of what a leader should be when you think about courage.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
How do you push this trait within your workplace and sphere of influence?
That's another good question. I think that you have to live and breathe and practice what you preach. You know what I'm saying? You can't just walk around thinking that people are going to bark at orders or do what you want them to do. You have to be a true leader and step into that role of practicing what you preach. And I think that, in order to institute this, we have to really accept, what our current state is in the country, right? We have to really accept that. And I think once you acknowledge that, I think you can then move beyond and work through some of the things. But it's having those tough conversations. And I think that you have to take that initial change and you have to, be engaged, be intentional with people. I think the humility factor of everything is, connecting with people on a most intimate basis. It's not necessarily just work related, because the mission will happen no matter what, right? But everyone makes sure that happens. It's caring for people, caring for what triggers them, what makes them upset, what drives them, and try to motivate them with that. You know what I'm saying?
And the next question falls with that. How do you make sure that everyone benefits from this trait and feel like they're heard and included?
That's another good question, because I think that drives towards inclusion. You have to, as leaders, all of us, we walk and we go a certain kind of path, and I think that a lot of us, when we're in new organizations, sometimes we may not feel comfortable because of the climate that we're in. And I think that as leaders, we need to create a safe space for individuals to come into an organization to feel inclusive. And I think that with that, it's going back to what I was talking about, which is stepping into that humility factor. Humbling yourself, because there's going to be some times where I may fall short, and I need you to help me get to that point, because we're marching together.
What are your expectations of how a leader should exemplify the trait of commitment?
I think a leader should exemplify that by just being dedicated to whatever he's doing. Whatever he said he's going to do, I need to see him actually do that, put the time in, put the effort to do that. It's kind of like leading by example. Once he does that, then I know that I can do the same things there.
Okay.
So with that, if you have a leader that isn't, how do you get him to display those traits?
Sometimes when you're a leader or you're around leaders, you can also lead them, right? Leadership always doesn't flow from the top down, it will go from the bottom up. So if I see a leader who's not exemplifying those traits, then I might have to step in and really commit myself to something to show him or show them that this is how you really do it. If you want people to follow you as a leader, you have to show.
So how would you know that this leader is not just talking the talk, just saying, I believe in this? How do you know he's being genuine?
How do I know it's not just mouth service?
Yes.
That's really easy. I mean, we all need things from our leaders and our supervisors, right? So when we ask them to do these things, do they complete the task? Do they complete the mission or whatever it is? Whatever it is with you. It could be something as simple as, hey, can I go and leave? Did they go over your checklist? Did they make sure everything is correct so that you can actually go and leave? Or you want to go on the last minute deployment. Do they help you in the process of getting everything set up so you can leave and everything at home is okay? So it's just kind of watching them to see if they're going through the process step by step the way it should.
Next question for you. How do you push this trait within your workplace and sphere of influence?
I just try to lead by example. I'm there for anybody that I work for or work with, or anybody in the Air Force. People ask me questions or help for anything, I try to stop what I'm doing and help that person. That's basically how I do it. Just lead by example.
And in your workplace, is diversity and inclusion taken seriously?
Yes, it's taken very seriously. We try to include everybody in everything we do. We try to kind of stand back and look at the group as a whole to see who might be excluded from things and not know it. Because I think, we all seem to think that we're in a family, right? We all seem to think that we do things for each other, but somebody might not get as much love as somebody else, right? So sometimes you got to step outside of the group as a total and kind of look and see, who might not be getting all the love that they should be getting. And then once you find that, you step in and give that person love. Just to show them that you are part of this group, you are part of this family and this team.
So it seems right now you're part of a really good work center. Has there been a time where you're not a part of a so receptive work center where you're trying to push these traits and it's not being received?
No, right now in my work center, everything that I push, because I'm a desk superintendent, is well received. And people know that when they need my help, I'm there for them, and they take on those same traits, right? If I need them for something, I ask them, they do that. But if you are in a workplace or a work center that you are the only person there that's exemplifying those things, you might need to have a conversation with somebody. A couple people, get them on board with you. The more people that you have behind you doing the same things, then it might be easier to lead other people in that work center.
How do you make sure that everyone benefits from the traits and feels heard and included?
You ask people's opinions. You bring everybody in on every type of decision that has to affect or deal with the work center at their level. You ask questions, and when they give responses, you have to actually follow out those responses. If somebody says, hey, maybe we shouldn't come in at this time, change the rule, make them feel like they're heard.
So for me personally, how do you know that you're getting the actual, the candid answer, if you will?
That's all about knowing the people you're talking to, like knowing your audience. The people I work with, I know them very intimately, so I know when it's the real answer, or if it's, as people say, the Air Force answer. I would prefer the real answer because that's how you get past a lot of the red tape.
What's cultural intelligence mean to you?
Well, before you talk about cultural intelligence, you gotta sort of define what culture is, right? Culture is a set of values, beliefs, or institutions that's specific to a group. But culture just isn't your family culture or something personal like your ethnicity. There's professional culture as well, right? Differences between military and civilian, different cultures between AFSCs, even squadrons. So you gotta think about that, and when you do, you realize that we operate in a very, very diverse cultural environment, especially in the military where we're working closely with other career fields and everything. So cultural intelligence is the understanding and recognition of these differences and similarities between behaviors and mannerisms between these different cultures and the ability to adapt to them.
So what are your expectations of how a leader should exemplify this trait?
Well, a cultural intelligent leader should be able to recognize these different behaviors, different cues, so that way they could adapt their style and their approach to how they communicate, and so they could be more effective. A leader with this trait doesn't shy away from different cultural environments. Instead, they're motivated and they seek out those environments so that way they could learn and build diverse teams.
How do you push this trait within your workplace and sphere of influence?
The first is training. You got to develop the knowledge of those around you so they could expand their cultural scope and be able to identify these differences and similarities. It also gives them the opportunity to look at their own culture and how that could shape their perception of others around them. But knowledge is nothing without application. So not only do you have to train them, you have to give them the opportunity to apply it. And one of the ways the leader could do that is to develop diverse teams when they're setting up projects and everything like that. This enables cross-cultural skills such as relational skills, increases their tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty, and also gives them a chance to be flexible in their behavior to different cultural demands.
How do you make sure that everyone benefits from this trait and feels heard and included?
That's a big question. I always think about my own experience when it comes to culture in the Air Force. I'm originally from Guam. It's a small island in the middle of the Pacific. And when I first joined, my first base was Montana. So,
Same here.
Yeah, good old Malmstrom Air Force Base. And needless to say, it was a shock. It was a different culture, both professionally and a completely different environment from my tropical island paradise I grew up in. I'm in a snowy mountain, isolated, different culture of the people around the base. So it was difficult. And I struggled silently with fitting in. And one day I had a shop chief who realized I wasn't interacting with my coworkers on a lot of subjects they like to talk about, or I just behaved differently. And he just asked me about Guam, like the values of the people, beliefs, what's important, family, my struggles with living in Montana. And he's Hispanic. So he discovered that there's a lot of similarities between my island culture and his background. And one of those similarities was bonding over a meal. So he decided, why don't we're gonna do a squadron potluck. Everyone's gonna bring a dish from their childhood, one of their favorite dishes, and just explain the dish, why it's important to them, and we'll just all have a good time. And that enabled a lot of my coworkers to learn a little bit more about my background, why I behave the way I do, why I think the way I do, and it really helped them to understand me and how they could approach me and make me feel included. So, leader has to develop those opportunities for those around them and empower people to talk about it. That's also another big thing. Make it open so that everyone could feel comfortable to explain who they are. And even if it only makes a difference with one person, me, for example, that's a success. All you need is just to affect one and you'd accomplish your goal.
Did you have the chance to do that for someone else while you was in Montana?
Not so much in Montana. I felt like I was one of one for many times. But I did have the opportunity when I got to Little Rock. I met another person, yes, from Guam actually, and got to introduce that person to different groups of people. And once again through food, and also I had the opportunity here in McGuire Air Force Base. I feel like whenever people find out I'm from Guam, I'm like the contact person for everyone. Like, oh, you got hold of Sergeant Rodriguez. He'll get you around and introduce you to some people. And it's very rewarding because there's nothing more detrimental to a development of an airman than when they feel isolated. So as soon as they feel included, and that includes their background, it makes their development a lot better and makes them more effective as an asset for the military as well.
Have you had any conflicts with any other service member over your culture?
No. One thing about cultural intelligence is also keeping an open mind. That's one other important part of it, is open-mindedness. Like I said, your own cultural background could skew your own perception of how someone behaves. So unless you don't know about that person's background, before you cast judgment, is gain understanding first. Why does a person behave that way? Maybe it's something that they're raised in. Try to understand the background of that person before you make your decisions.
Do you think that senior leaders do a good job of trying to be knowledgeable in other people's cultures?
Well, I would say there are definitely a few leaders who are definitely more cognizant of it. I feel like cultural diversity is a topic that's definitely been gaining a lot of attention recently because now we're not just talking about ethnicities or racial culture. We're talking about culture of an individual being part of a subgroup, and now a leader has to be more aware of how they approach, and I feel like it's getting better. People are starting to understand that just because they were raised one way or think one direction doesn't mean that it's the only way that a person could approach something.
So since the time that how long have you been in?
Been in 12 years, old man.
Since the time that you came in until now, what difference do you see in cultural intelligence and senior leaders?
I would say there's a huge difference. I think people are becoming more accepting of different cultures. That's 100% true. Like I said, I struggled silently because I didn't feel like people really wanted to know about me. I mean, it was obvious I was different. I was in Montana. I look Black, Asian, Native American to the locals there, Filipino to some people, but I identify myself from where I'm from, and I'm Chamorro. And that people weren't comfortable with asking those questions. I feel like people are now more ready to ask, hey, where are you from? What's your background? And I feel like just having the courage to ask the question to gain more knowledge is definitely a step in the right direction, and I see that happening more often.
Okay, so my last question, why do you think cultural intelligence is a big deal now?
One of the main reasons I believe is, it's a double-edged sword, right? We always talk about how social media could affect things, but social media could also do some good. And social media has opened our eyes to a different world now. Now we have ready access to see how people behave in different parts of the world, in different towns and everything. So now we could kind of get an understanding when we have someone coming in, a new troop that we're going to supervise or something, we could see on social media a quick search about where they're coming from. Is it a big town? Is it a small town? Are there more cows than people? What's important to them? You could kind of start framing your mindset before you reach that person. So I feel like it's becoming a big deal because it's more available for everyone to see in the world.
What are your expectations of how a leader should exemplify cognizance of bias?
My expectations of that is a leader that can really include everybody into everything and not show favoritism as well. Kind of just be themselves and be open to other people and their cultures.
Hi, sir. So how do you push this trait within your workplace and the sphere of people that you influence?
How I push that in my workplace is I get people to really bond together, get to know somebody's background, get to know where they're from, how they grew up. Learning those things about different people will help you better lead those people, be better wingmen to those people, because you'll know what to expect. You know what they look for, what different things trigger them that you don't want to do, things like that.
So how do you make sure that everyone benefits from this trade and they feel heard and included?
To make sure that everybody feels that they can benefit from this trait is really giving people scenarios of how it can help them. You kind of give an explanation of where a person can be closed off. Then you give an explanation where a person can be very open to these different things. Then you can show how that can improve a unit. What was the second part of that question?
How they can feel heard and included.
Oh, how they can feel heard and included. It's just being open to people and their different opinions. When they give you suggestions on different things, it's following through on those different suggestions and making sure that everybody in the unit or everybody in the squadron knows that, you know, it came from this person.
So I know that we all have biases, whether they're positive or negative. How do you keep yours in check?
I keep mine in check by going through scenarios in my head, basically kind of slowing down, taking myself out of the situation and saying, you know, if this happened with person A and this happened with person would be, you know, what would be the outcome? Is that outcome beneficial to everybody in the situation? And if I don't think that outcome is beneficial, then I adjust it to make sure that it is beneficial to the people in the situation.
And the definition of curiosity is just the strong desire to know or to learn something. And I feel like that's really important when it comes to talking about an inclusive leader is to be inclusive, you have to know your people and you have to bring them in. But if you don't know them well enough, then how can you bring them into the team or bring them to the table to have certain conversations and make those decisions for the mission? First question.
What are your expectations of how leaders should exemplify this trait?
I believe that as a leader, and what I expect from my own leaders is that they ask those questions. Like they come to you and they come to find out like, what about you? What's up with your family? Where are you from? Where was your last base? Just things like that, because if you don't know someone, how can you make them feel a part of the team? And I think that if you flip it around on someone and you say, well, what if I never asked you about you? What if I never asked you about your opinion on something, or we're making a decision, I didn't bring you into that? Wouldn't you feel a little upset? Wouldn't that make you not want to be a part of the team, right? So I just think that if you bring people in and you make them a part of the team and you let them know that they're important on that team, they'll perform better. So that's what I want my leaders to do. Bring in people that don't look like them, because a lot of times I'm the only person in the room that looks like me. So, you know, I think we should work on that.
So how do you push this trait within your workplace?
I bring people in with me. When someone's bringing me into a meeting, I look around and I'm like, well, who else can help? You know, like who else has something that can add to this topic or help us make this decision, right? So if I see that there's, I don't want to be too specific, but if there's a room full of white males, right, and I'm the only black female, and I see that there's other women or other people of a different race that I know have expertise or some type of knowledge about this topic, I bring them in. I don't understand why they can't be a part of the conversation. That's what we're supposed to be doing, right?
And how do you make sure that everyone benefits from the trait and feels heard and included?
I think that first you have to make a safe space for people, like a safe environment to let them know like, hey, it's okay for you to be here. We want you to be here. We want you to be a part of this thing. And once you let people know, like, we want you to be here and it's okay, then people will be open to discuss those things. And then once you bring them in, you ask them those questions, they can see like, oh, okay, I do matter and what I have to say matters. And that's how I do that.
We have just explained the 6 signature traits of inclusive leadership. However, it is important to note that these traits provide leaders at all levels with an opportunity to leverage the diversity of their teams and provide them with a competitive advantage to outperform our adversaries, as well as unlock innovation, increase performance, and create a sense of belonging to all people. So whether you're from your state capital to our nation's capital, or from the Pineapple to the Big Apple, we are your American Airmen, and we will fly, fight, and win. So in the meantime, if you're interested in gaining more insight, please reach out to your respective Diversity and Inclusion Working Group unit representative for more information pertaining to training, resources, or how to get involved. Please follow us on Facebook at JBMDL Diversity and Inclusion, Instagram at JBMDL_DI, or email us at the link below.